Alrighty, so we're back. One more time at it. Okay, this is just We the People News. Not attorney, not giving legal advice. Educational purposes only. Alright, do your own research, people. That's the only way you learn. Okay? And never look just straight forward. Always look around you. Be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. Alright? Arm yourself with knowledge. Use that Second Amendment. Okay? Alright, let's proceed forward on the rest of this 10th Amendment thing.
Reservation of power from the Articles of Confederation. That the Anti-Federalists, I just cited Patrick Henry, but others talked about this as well. For example, Federal Farmer, that missing piece.
Now you got to do some heavily research on the Federal Farmer, okay? They did a lot of writings in a lot of these things.
By January of 1788, remember, Constitution Day, the end of the Philadelphia Convention, was September 17th, 1787. And, the ratification debates really weren't, there weren't a ton of them before January of 1788. There were some. But the Massachusetts ratifying convention, that's the moment where it was make or break for the Constitution. And this issue was really number one on the list. Hear from Pauline Mayer's great book, Ratification, The People Debate the Constitution. She put it like this: the Massachusetts ratifying convention was the first to meet in a state where there was significant opposition to the Constitution. And what would happen if Massachusetts failed to ratify or refused to do so? She said other states, particularly New Hampshire and New York, would probably follow her example. Everyone understood that if Massachusetts didn't ratify, then, well, there would be another domino that fell. They would not get the full ratification that they want. And she continued, that would all but seal the Constitution's fate. It was going to lose, since Rhode Island, and now perhaps also Virginia, were likely to vote no. And around halfway through that ratification convention in Massachusetts, again, it started in early January 1788, by around, I think it was January 22nd, they were doing some head counts about who was in favor, who was against. And from what I've read, by the 22nd, so about 2 weeks in, it was 144 in favor, 192 against. It was clearly getting crushed. And the very next day, Rufus King wrote to James Madison saying, well, things aren't looking good here at all. He said, our prospects are gloomy, but hope is not entirely extinguished. They decided to work on a strategy. He said, we are now thinking of amendments to be submitted, not as a condition of our assent and ratification, but as the opinion of the convention subjoined to their ratification. So the plan became strategic. They had to come up with a way to get some of the people on the margins to say, okay, well, we like the plan, but we don't like it as it now stands. So there are various kind of categories of anti-federalists. The vast majority of them were not of the mentality that they were going to reject it no matter what. They loved the Articles of Confederation. The vast majority, even on the anti-federalist side, were on board with revising the Articles of Confederation, or even going with the Constitution that was being proposed, but now not, and the phrase was regularly used, as it now stands. They wanted to see significant amendments to it. And that's exactly what they did in Massachusetts. John Hancock and Samuel Adams, who were both probably opposed but they were quiet about it. They were both not in favor of what they saw. Well, they decided to make a deal with the Federalists, Rufus King, Theophilus Parsons, and a few others. We're going to support ratification as long as we can include recommended amendments. That was the deal. And first, number one on that list was a reiteration of what was in Article 2 of the Articles of Confederation, a precursor to what became the 10th Amendment. First, that it be explicitly declared that all powers not expressly delegated by the aforesaid Constitution are reserved to the several states to be by them exercised. And with that, it passed. The vote was 187 to 168. So it was still pretty close. And Thomas Jefferson was actually a big fan of the strategy. He wrote about this a number of times, from France to various people that he was corresponding with during the ratification debates. Here's a letter to Edward Carrington. He said, "My first wish was that 9 states would adopt it in order to ensure what was good in it, and that the others might, by holding off, produce the necessary amendments." So he even was of the mind that he liked a lot of the stuff that was in it, but Jefferson really wanted 2 primary amendments, and one of them was what he called a Bill of Rights. But really what he was saying, he wanted a kind of delegated reserve line in the sand. He said the First Amendment proposed by Massachusetts will in some degree answer this end. So he's basically saying that first proposal, that carryover from the Articles of Confederation, that precursor to the 10th Amendment, was really his first choice on that list. So again, his first wanted to see 9 states ratify so it would go into effect, and have the other 4 voted down, and that would create an environment strategically where they could get these amendments introduced. But he said, the plan of Massachusetts is far preferable, and will, I hope, be followed by those who are yet to decide. And again, that set the stage. Jefferson's voice probably got around and helped push this forward as well, because South Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, and New York all followed suit with very similar recommended amendments. A couple of them actually copied it almost verbatim, similar recommended amendments. And when you connect all the dots, from the Revolution to ratification, it's pretty easy to see why Thomas Jefferson then considered the 10th Amendment the foundation to the entire system. Here he is, 10 months. This is after the Constitution went into effect. And in 1791, 10 months to the day before the Bill of Rights was ratified, he said, "I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid on this ground, that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people." But this foundation wasn't just about creating a dividing line between the powers of various governments, between federal and state power, or how most people today define states' rights. It was about something much deeper, something much more important. Samuel Adams described it like this to Richard Henry Lee. He said, "I mean, my friend, to let you know how deeply I am impressed with a sense of the importance of amendments, that the good people may clearly see the distinction, or there is a distinction, between the federal powers vested in Congress and the sovereign authority belonging to the several states, which is the palladium of the private and personal rights of the citizens."
Now recall this, right? Capital C, citizen, not the lowercase c, right? Some people says it's not a big deal. It is, okay? This is how they trick us. Capital S for states with the small. What do you see on documents? All caps. Corporation body, okay? Lower C. 2 different types of citizens. And you have to really understand the word magic and the spelling and their intent of them doing these stupid things. And, using all these trickeries to violate our rights with our ignorance.
And some years later, John Taylor of Caroline described it the same way. The dividing line, the line in the sand between federal and state power. That's the foundation, the basis for the preservation of liberty. He said the preservation of liberty must depend on the division of power between the state and federal governments, or an accurate distinction between the powers bestowed and reserved. Why? Because anything else would lead to arbitrary power, usurpation of power, and consolidation or centralization of power. The same kind of stuff that they fought a long, bloody war to secede from, to free themselves from. And in a letter to Elbridge Gerry, that's how Samuel Adams described it. He said, without such distinction, there will be danger of the Constitution issuing imperceptibly and gradually into a consolidated government over all the states. He said, the people of the United States, being in different climates, of different education and manners, and possessed of different habits and feelings under one consolidated government, cannot long remain free or indeed under any kind of government but despotism. But here's the caveat. Merely putting it on paper, no matter how awesome those words you put on paper, it's not enough. It doesn't do anything. Words on paper don't enforce themselves. They never did, and they never will. And John Dickinson understood, well, of course you want to have a better constitution rather than a worse constitution. It should be more clearly limiting the government's power rather than being super vague, of course. And Dickinson, being the lead kind of author, I often call him the father of the Articles of Confederation, also a prominent supporter of ratification some years later. He put it like this: a good constitution promotes, but not always produces, a good administration. And that leads us to the essential point. The entire structure, this entire foundation, was designed to protect individual liberty, individual rights. And why or how? By preventing consolidation and arbitrary power, by making it very clear what power was delegated and reserved. But this additional piece of the puzzle is really the most important piece, and that is the piece that's almost totally forgotten and ignored today, and that is who is in charge. John Jay, who later became the first Chief Justice, put it like this: the Constitution only serves to point out that part of the people's business which they think proper by it to refer to the management of the persons therein designated. He had a way with words, John Jay. He said those persons are to receive that business to manage not for themselves and as their own, but as agents and overseers for the people to whom they are constantly responsible and by whom only they are to be appointed. And most people today have no clue what any of that means, but I think James Wilson summed it up best. He said, as our constitutions are superior to our legislatures, so the people are superior to our constitutions. That's the pecking order. People, then below people is the constitution that the people have created.
Right there, y'all. The Constitution does not apply to us. You've heard in other videos if you've been around long enough, right? But the Constitution is a do not trespass upon the people's rights. And if they must enter the people's freedom, then this is what they must follow through, right? Even in the Fourth Amendment, all 5 elements in the Fourth Amendment must be present, or that Fourth Amendment is void. That means that search warrant's void. All of that Fourth Amendment is void to the government of any form. All right? And if they take 3 out of the 5, they just trespassed upon your freedom. All right? They did a usurpation and ignored the Fourth Amendment. They also created battery and domestic abuse upon you. These amendments is so strong, and yet we don't have clear understanding due to the legalese statutory that become above the Constitution. And yet we keep on saying the Constitution above the law. And everybody keeps on fighting about it on opposite sides. And all the judges shouldn't be what you call, red or blue, or, Democrat or Republican, right? They're supposed to be there bipartisan, and that's it. That is their job. That is their duty. Not to be a Democrat or a Republican, but a constitutionalist. And not supposed to just go by statutes.
Or their legislatures or governments. And he said, indeed, the superiority in this last instance is much greater, for the people possess over our Constitution's control and act as well as in right. We see that structure, that hierarchy spelled out in the text of the 10th Amendment itself, ratified December 15th, 1791. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The entire American system is based on that foundation. It's not the Constitution that protects the people. It's the people that protect and defend their own Constitution and their own liberty, whether the government happens to like it or not. John Hancock was right. The powers reserved by the people render them secure. They just need to use them. Of course, the people can never use what they don't even know they have. And unfortunately, the government-run and government-approved so-called education system never teaches any of this stuff. And that's a huge part of the reason why we work so hard every single day to reach and teach more and more people about these essential foundational principles from the founders, the old revolutionaries, and of course the great thinkers that they read and learned from. And nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. If you got a couple of bucks of that quickly devaluing dirty government fiat, please consider throwing it our way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Our membership program starts out at just $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options as well. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/.
All right. So there we go on that. Education, people. They're not supposed to have all this qualified immunity